Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Concern Podcast, where we unpack political, social, economic, and cultural stories shaping our world. I am Emmanuel Taban. Now, with all the decisions and steps that President Salva Kiir is making, starting with recognizing Stephen Parr, the current Minister of Peace Building, is the legitimate leader of the SPLM IO function, to removing members of the cabinet or the ministers who are aligned to the detained First Vice President Machar and replacing them with Stephen Parr's loyalists, to removing members of the assembly or members of parliament who are aligned to First Vice President Riek Machar and SPLM IO mainstream and replacing them again with Stephen Parr's loyalists. With all these decisions, it is becoming much more clearer that President Salva Kiir Mayardit is using what we call the divide and rule strategy, or the divide and conquer. It's very clear. For those of you who are students of history or who have learned political education, you might have realized that this same strategy was in use when the colonialists were in Africa. Because they fear that when they have all the African communities united, it becomes very hard to control them. It will be very difficult to do that. And in order to create them, to create that space and to make them manageable by these colonialists, what the colonialists did was that they used this strategy, the divide and conquer strategy. And the way that they use it is that they selected a specific group of African communities in that specific country to give them all the privileges, they favored them against the other community. And in that way, they are trying to create some kind of division within these communities, so that these communities hate themselves, so that they don't unite. And when they do it that way, it becomes so easy for the colonialists to manage these African communities. That is the divide and rule strategy. And to me, it appears as if President Salva Kiir Mayardit is using this strategy against the SPLM IO. Very clear. And the first signal that he's using that is when he knows very well that Stephen Parr and Riek Machar, they are from the same community. The Nuer community, of course, we all know that. He knows very well that Stephen Parr and Machar, they are all members of the SPLM IO initially, before the breakaway. And he knows very well that the SPLM IO, if let to operate as a whole, to be very, very strong and very hard to manage. So the only thing that he can do is that, I don't know if he created that breakaway situation between Parr and Machar, but it looks so. And after creating that function, that breakaway from between Machar and Parr, he is dividing members of this specific community, of the Nuer community. He is dividing the supporters of the SPLM IO, because when Machar and Parr are apart, they both have followers. The followers of Machar will go to Machar's side. The followers of Parr comes to his side. And these were initially members of the SPLM IO. When President Kiir goes in and removes members of the SPLM IO allied to Vice President Machar and replaces them with members of the SPLM IO function under PAR, he is creating an impression, and he is creating that, he is trying to create that division between the two, but also getting support from a section of the SPLM IO, which is PAR's function. And the family members, the friends, the relatives of those who Kiir appoints them to take over this position, they becomes PAR's loyalists. They becomes Kiir's loyalists. They becomes Kiir supporters. And in that way, he is degrading the support. He is degrading the unity of the SPLM IO. It becomes very easy for him to manage because they are divided. That is the divide and rule policy. Very clear. And we can all see the tensions that are already arising out of these decisions made by the president. We can clearly see that there is a high tension between the supporters of Riek Machar and supporters of Stephen Parr. Very clear. And this is the intention. The intentions of the divide and rule strategy is to create this kind of division within an opposition party or an opposition group, so that they become unfocused to face a common enemy. I'm just referring as an enemy in its sense, but I'm not saying Kiir is an enemy. But the essence, the intentions of using divide and rule policy or divide and rule or conquer strategy is so that instead of this opposition group, instead of this opposition party focusing on how they can deal with their major opponent, who is the president, they spend much of their time exchanging words and just focusing on confrontations between or amongst themselves. That is the intentions of divide and rule policy. And Kiir is executing that strategy perfectly against the SPLM IO. He is doing it right. He is doing it perfect. I don't know if Stephen Parr knows that, but that is what exactly the president is doing. He is trying to divert the unity of the SPLM IO and turn it into some kind of tensions, so that instead of focusing on dealing with how they can go about maybe winning Kiir in an election or doing other things, they are focusing on divisions and exchanging words. That is the divide and rule policy. On our business section for today, are you a South Sudanese parent living in Uganda who desires to preserve your child's national identity, cultural values, and academic continuity without sending them back to South Sudan? Then worry no more. Excel International School proudly offers South Sudanese families in Uganda the opportunity to access the South Sudan national curriculum in a secure, nurturing, and academically enriching environment right in Uganda. As you pursue stability and opportunity in Uganda, your children can continue their education seamlessly following the South Sudan syllabus, guided by qualified, experienced teachers who understand both the academic standards and cultural foundations of South Sudan. At Excel, they deliver genuine South Sudan curriculum, strong moral and academic foundation, experienced and culturally grounded educators, safe and supporting learning environment, and convenient campuses both in Kampala and Arua. For the Kampala campus, they are located at Zambia opposite the American Embassy, or you can contact the principal at 077-168-2831 or 074-2288-712. And the Arua campus is located at Adalafu in Arua City, or you can contact the management at 077-3498-768. Admission for the 2026 and registration for the 2026 academic year is ongoing. Parents are encouraged to register early as places are limited. Give your children an education that connects them to home, heritage, and hope without borders. Excel International School. Fear God to excel.